Welcome to Stageworthy. I'm Phil Rickaby, the host of this podcast. The theater industry is a strange one. Those who aren't in it have a distinct impression of what it must be like, usually gleaned from film and television, which are largely fictionalized. And even those of us who are in the industry have some incorrect ideas about what the industry is like and what we have to be to succeed in it. Case in point, when I graduated from theater school, I had this idea that in order to be an actor, I needed to be an extrovert. I wasn't, but I told myself that I was so that I could fit into my idea of what an actor was supposed to be. And I tried to be an extrovert, but I was terrible at it. Years later, I started telling myself that I was an ambivert because I still wasn't ready to give up on the idea that an extroverted personality was needed to be an actor. But I knew that I hated schmoozing and parties and things like that. But I couldn't let myself be an introvert. I know now that there were two things going on. First, there were deeply ingrained lessons from childhood about being more outgoing and making friends. There was pressure to be social, and not being social was deemed bad behavior. Later on, when I first heard the word introvert, it was said as though it was a bad thing, and well, who wants to be something that's bad? But there was something else going on as well. I was conflating being an introvert with being shy. And since I was able to get on stage and be the center of attention, since I enjoyed that, I couldn't be shy, and therefore, I thought, couldn't be an introvert. And I carried that with me for a long time. That's something that's pretty common, mixing up introversion and shyness. So you have these two ideas, that introversion is somehow a bad thing, and that an introvert is shy in a world that seems like it is built for extroverts. That's why a few years back, I started another podcast with my friend Jess McAuley about being introverts in an extroverted world, because we just wanted to figure out how to be in the world and still be true to ourselves. We called it The Introvert's Guide to, and we've both learned a lot and become more comfortable with being introverts. But I wanted to talk to other introverts in the industry, and so I gathered 6 introverted actors to join me for an Introverted Actors Roundtable. And that's coming up in just a moment after I get through some housekeeping. If you enjoy Stageworthy, please rate the show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, you can also leave a review. Reviews and ratings help new people to find the show. If you want to keep up with what's going on with Stageworthy and my other projects, you can subscribe to my newsletter by going to philrickaby.com/subscribe. If you want to leave a tip for the show, you can drop some change in the virtual tip jar. I will put a link to that in the show notes. I also have a Patreon in support of the show. Stageworthy is and always has been a one-person operation. So not only do I arrange the guests, edit the show, promote the show, I created the music, and I also shoulder all of the financial responsibilities for keeping the show going. So your support for the show would mean the world. For a subscription of $5 a month, I will take you behind the scenes on the podcast, do regular Q&A sessions, and even present regular exclusive interactive conversations just for subscribers. You can find the Patreon at patreon.com/stageworthypod. Remember, you can find Stageworthy on Twitter and Instagram at StageworthyPod, and you can find the website with the archive of all the episodes at stageworthypodcast.com. If you want to find me, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Phil Rickaby, and as I mentioned, my website is philrickaby.com. Joining me for this Introverted Actors Roundtable are playwright and actor Stephen Neer, actor and singer-songwriter Carolyn Fe, writer, composer, and performer Kristen Zaza, playwright and performer Genevieve Adam, actor and writer Michael Ripley, and my co-host on The Introvert's Guide to, writer and theater maker Jess McAuley. I don't know about you guys, but it took me a long time into my life in theater to come to the realization and acceptance of the fact that I was not an extrovert, because I had it in my head that you needed to be an extrovert to be an actor. And it took me quite a while to realize, A, that I was an introvert, and B, that was okay. What about you guys? Michael?
Yeah, I found out very quickly that I was sort of situationally introverted. Like there are times that, like especially when the cast includes people who are like have that competitively funny edge to them, that I shut down. Um, so there are times where I feel if I'm in the right environment, I can let my inner extrovert out. But the moment I encounter anything, uh, when you work with people who need to be the funniest person in the room, for example, um, I I can't take that. I shut right down.
I find the hardest thing for me is I'm good in like a group. I'm good in a small group, but as soon as we get into a situation with a lot of people, like I've said previously, if it's a group of people over 5, that's like once we get past 5, I'm out of my comfort zone. So if I'm in a group with a small number of people who are outgoing and over the top, I'm good. But other than that, I'm much in the same boat as you, Michael. Jess, I saw your hand go up first.
Yeah, I've always felt that because I was someone that preferred to be alone, that when I would be in these creative spaces with other creatives, that there was something wrong with me for wanting to be alone and just wanting to shut off. Um, and I didn't think I was going to thrive because of it. I thought that this was going to be a weakness of mine, that because I seek solitude majority of the times, that my career is now going to suffer. I must not be an artist. And there was a lot of guilt that I actually felt came along with it. And it wasn't until I realized how many other introverted performers were in the room that I felt myself coming more into myself as an actor.
I think it's an amazing thing once you do realize how many performers actually are introverts. There's a little bit of it can be a little bit freeing. Stephen, I saw your hand go up next.
You gotta unmute, Stephen.
Oh, hello. Hello, can you hear me? Oh, no.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good. All right. Sorry, I can't see the sound. The sound thing doesn't seem to be registering. Anyways, yeah, I don't know. I found myself in some really uncomfortable situations as an artist, because I trained initially as a director, and I was really stumbled for many years afterwards, trying to fit myself in the mold of being a director. And I was like, why is this not working for me? Because I trained for this, and I have all these ideas. And then I kind of realized, oh man, like I don't have I'm not comfortable with this sort of extroverted sense of wanting to sort of I don't know, I guess take charge or be the sort of the sort of the focal navigator, if you will, or at least that model of directing that I thought was appropriate to be a director. Like I just always felt really uncomfortable sort of having to be the person that sort of watches what's going on in a scene and then directs people and sort of being the authority. And I think it was one of the reasons that I finally realized, oh, I kind of enjoy playwriting more, and I enjoy the sort of the private space that comes with creating work sort of in the background. And then even when I've been in the rehearsal hall as a playwright, I've often found that I'm much more sort of in the background observing things and kind of speaking one-on-one with the director than I am sort of in a communal sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Carolyn.
Yeah. We're 7 people on this round table. Our cameras are off, but I see the 7 names, including mine, and listen to me. I'm starting to stutter already. I think I am a functional introvert. I mean, I am a performer, I am a singer, and I'm an actress on stage in front of camera. Something happens to me when I'm working, when I'm on stage or in front of camera. Aside from the lines, yes, I kind of zone out who is watching me. When it comes to being a singer, where it's almost free improv on movement or whatever, I don't remember what I do on stage. And then coming off stage right away, right after, when people start rushing at you, that really freaks me out. And then festivals. Oh my goodness, whether it be theater festivals, I know I have to be there if I'm not working, because there are things that I want to see, food I want to taste. But I wish that there was nobody else on the grounds.
It's funny because Jess and I have a podcast about being introverts, and we often talk about the theater world, and we have spoken about the fact that on stage, fine, we perform, we do the thing, and people are like, how can that be an introvert? And then after the show, as soon as people start approaching to talk to you about the show, that's when it sort of hits. It's like just this, it's not fear, it's just like sudden discomfort. Kristen.
Yeah, this I thought would be a good opportunity to jump in with my feelings here, because for me, what Carolyn just said really resonated, and you as well, Phil, about, I think the work is one thing. And that is, I agree, where, I find my confidence, and we all know, like, friends and family come at you after saying, like, I would never get up in front of all those people and do that. And that's one thing, but it's the, like the opening nights, or the, the auditions, the events, the fundraisers that ultimately I found the most difficult as an introvert. And I don't really, I know that currently none of us are, not many of us are doing work on stage right now, but I sort of let that go, actually, because I found it too difficult. Like, I just don't think, I think it was bringing out something kind of unhealthy in me and my personality, and it just wasn't a good fit. And I made the switch to audio drama, and I'm much happier talking to myself. I feel like I'm a happier, healthier person working on my own and not having that element, because it just felt like constantly needing to prove your value outside of the work itself. And I found it difficult to not to not just let the work speak for itself. You know what I mean? It's the social element that I was the most uncomfortable with.
Absolutely. It's like, as I was saying about when those people come up to you after the show, for the longest time I was so awkward when people would do that, and after a little while I figured in my head, I thought, those people are coming because they've enjoyed the show and they want a piece of something. For them, the show is still ongoing. And what I learned to do, actually, was I practiced saying thank you, because I used to just sort of be like, oh, thank you, just like this really awkward sound that I would make. And I learned and practiced a genuine, what I consider my genuine thank you. It includes a stammer and everything, just to make it sound like I'm not too practiced. But it was a way for me to be able to deal with the public without being too awkward. Jess, I saw your hand go up first.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring it back to the like, something we've talked about on our podcast before, Phil, was when we are performing, I think what makes it so much easier for us to transition onto the stage and be able to confront an audience, or you know, whatever our connection with the fourth wall be, is that we don't see the audience as many people. We see them as one being, something that we can easily connect with. It's just this big beast. Whereas whenever that fourth wall is suddenly broken now, where we're confronted by the many faces of that beast, there's something that's just uncomfortable about it. I for me at least, you know, I also don't like being the center of attention. I will absolutely go out of my way to avoid that one. and I've gotten married, so um yeah, I don't know. I very much could stay on stage and just say thank you to an entire audience and dodge out the back door if I could.
I mean, that would be preferable, to be honest. Like, if you could ditch your way out, do your thank you to the group, and then be gone, I think that would be ideal. It unfortunately doesn't always work that way. Stephen, you had some thoughts.
Yeah, it kind of speaks to that sort of the performative aspect of that people are talking about with regards to sort of being out, right, and extroverted in front of like individual people. And I have to admit, like, one of the things that I think is I've been very harsh about myself with regards to my career has been my inability to mingle at for lack of a better word, industry parties, or opening nights where industry people are going to be, artistic directors or company dramaturgs. I recall having a conversation with a friend of mine who's also a playwright director, and I recall her saying, "Oh yeah, I'm going to the opening night of such and such party at Tarragon, and such is going to be there, and dramaturg from Factory is going to be there, and all of these names are going to be there." And she says, "Yeah, and I gotta go and mingle, because this is how I'm going to pitch myself." And I said, "God, that's so difficult. I have so much difficulty doing that." And she said, "Well, you got to do it. It's how you get ahead. Like it or not, you got to do it. You got to do it. Because if you don't meet these people, then that's it." And this is when I was living in Hamilton, and I just thought, "Oh, why the fuck am I even doing this?" Like I've got one professional theater in Hamilton, which really isn't much of a professional theater. Like they don't develop any plays, but that's a whole separate conversation. But even when I was living in Toronto, it was tough. Like the Fringe tent, right, would be like, oh God, I would like shake. I would feel so bad about going to the Fringe tent, because I wouldn't want to mingle with people. I would always be so relieved by like, oh, there's a table full of people that I know, and oh, there's someone of some name or import who's there and is talking, and so I'm not going to feel like all like fucked up, like I'm pitching myself to them. And I have found that aspect of being a theater artist so goddamn exhausting, and so like. And I've been really hard on myself, saying, "Oh, well, Stephen, you're so bad at mingling, so that's why your career is nowhere, because you haven't been able to mingle, and you haven't been able to pitch yourself to this person or that person, so that's why you're not a playwright in residence or what have you." And I think that was actually why I wanted to be on this podcast, on this roundtable, because I I've just really, like, looking back on my career, I've been like, maybe I've been like way too hard on myself. Like,
There are
yeah.
absolutely, this is absolutely something that I can pretty much guarantee that everybody who's in this roundtable has experienced. The networking aspect of this industry
It's awful.
is awful. It's terrible. I know that, like, whether it's like at the Fringe, going to the Fringe tent, or flyering a line, I have to flyering a line. I have to work myself up. If you see me before I hit a line, I guarantee you I'm over across the street with my head between my knees, just trying to breathe and calm down, psyching myself up to do it. And then when it's over, I'm like sweating and done. And going to the Fringe tent, the only way I can get myself in there is I'm like, okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go in, I'm going to stay for 15 minutes. And if I don't run into anybody, I'm out. And that's the promise I make, 15 minutes. And if I see somebody, if I see people I know, you better believe I gravitate towards them. And I am essentially holding on for dear life, and I will pass off to the next person if I need to. But God, it is so difficult. Carolyn, I think I saw you first.
Yeah. Stephen just said a word that just made me break out into sweats. The word mingle. Oh, good Lord. That's horrible. That's just, and Phil, your example of going into the Fringe tent. Oh my God. Any industry event, even family parties or friend parties, I find myself planning strategically. What are my moves going to be? Rehearsing some lines so as not to sound like, hey, how are ya? I just rehearsing those lines again and again, and then finding myself, because, I'm in Toronto now. I live in Toronto now. 2 years we're in this pandemic. Thank goodness that all those face-to-face parties are not happening.
Oh my God, yes.
But if, let's say we weren't in a pandemic, I would have to force myself to get to those parties, to show my face, to say, hey folks, I'm in Toronto now and you want to hire me? And that's the wrong line to say, of course. But, try to find the right words to just be part of the party when you're seeing everybody else having their wine and cheese and it's as if it's nothing.
Carolyn, I want to point something out to you is because when you go to these things, these networking events or something, our attention is always drawn to the people in the middle of the room who are mingling and going around. Next time you find yourself in that situation, I want you to turn your eyes to the edges of the room, because you will see people there, and those are your people. And I will teach you right now the magic words to say to your people. Don't you hate these things?
I'm in. I'm using that.
Yeah. No, just look for those people because they're there. And you say something along those lines. They're your new best friends right there. You have yourself a little troop of introverts. Somebody's going to come over and say, what's all these interesting people doing? And maybe an extrovert will adopt you and take you around the room. But if at the very least, you found your little cabal of introverts. Genevieve, we haven't heard from you, so I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Hey, first of all, the Fringe tent is absolutely the maker of alcoholic introverts, because the number of times that a little Dutch courage has been required, I mean, it's bad. It can be bad out there. I feel almost, I think, a different pressure when I go to an event and I see people. I feel that's almost more pressure if I see people I know, because then I feel like, oh, I have to talk about how great I'm doing, or ask them about, hey, what are you doing? I much prefer to go to these events and be like, oh, great, I see no one. Great, I'm going to go sit in the corner and hope that Carolyn or someone of her ilk comes and finds me, and we can both go, wow, this is tough. Shouldn't our work just speak for itself?
It is definitely a tough one. And like I said, like when I go to those things, Like, it's just like when I go to a party, I have to promise myself, 15 minutes, especially for the Fringe tent. I'm so stressed going into a networking event like that the only way I'm getting myself in that door is what seems to someone else like a very short period of time, but it's 15 minutes. And chances are I'll stay longer because I will run into somebody and I will almost literally glom on to them, whether it's a physical glom or just like a proximity glom who's like in the middle of a conversation or something like that. But I will do that, and maybe I'll stay longer, but it's just the promise of all I have to do is 15 minutes. And if I don't see anybody, I can go. That's what gets me in the room.
That's
Michael.
a good way.
Yeah, I'm envious of extroverts, but I've only realized this later in life. My envy was masked as judgment, kind of a self-care or a protection. That kind of shaped my opinion of people throughout my life. I've always been drawn to people who know how to turn it off. Like on SCTV, I always enjoyed Eugene Levy more than Martin Short, for example. And I never realized that this was even a thing until I saw Eugene Levy on Letterman once and realized that he was this quiet and meek person. And it's kind of in a flash, I realized that the reason I was drawn to him was because he was a reflection of me. My judgment of people who, quote unquote, couldn't turn it off was born of my own insecurity more than anything. And understanding that has made things a little bit easier, but also I just don't like people all that much,
Michael, I wonder if for you that feeling that you had about the extroverts, is it also exacerbated by the fact that so many people, some even in the industry, think that because you are an actor or a performer or in theater that you are automatically an extrovert? And that can be, to me, that feels very like, well, that's quite an assumption, but it feels off-putting. What do you think about that?
No, I think you're right. Like, and I remember I did a few plays for CBC Radio in the late 90s, and back when they did actually in-house productions of plays on the radio. And the casting director liked me and brought me on to audition for this ongoing series. And I've always been really good at character voices. It was kind of a political show. There was the cast was called upon to do impressions, which I'm not great at, but I've always had a bit of a knack for character voice, and I nailed the audition. And I remember and they hired me, and then I remember on the first day, all the actors were gathered in the room, and I shared a joke, just a little bit that made fun of the way people in the audience get holier than thou on shows like Maury Povich or of that ilk. It wasn't even my joke. It was a share of a thing done by someone I'd worked with previously, and that was a point I underlined. Anyway, the room thought it was hilarious. Everyone but this one comedian. And once the laughter died down, they stood up and in front of everyone kind of walked up to me and gave me this pat on my head. I kid you not. It says, "Not bad, Rook. Solid single, not a home run, but honestly, we weren't expecting much." And I was crushed. He thought he was being hilarious. Everyone laughed. And sure, that was bullying, but it was also him just kind of staking a claim in a way that took a great deal of confidence. He sort of challenged me to be what you were talking about, that extroverted person that all actors should be, that I should be able to just take that joke, that it should just roll like water off a duck's back and we can all move on. But the truth is, he climbed me up. Like, that show ran for 3 or 4 seasons. I was dropped after season 1 because I completely lost my confidence.
Well, in some ways, I mean, he was essentially like claiming his territory as the comedian, right? and it was generally a shitty thing to do. Stephen.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you brought up the notion of how others perceive those who are in theater, because I wonder if some of the conflict and the discord that happens with introverts in this industry, and specifically, I'm sort of talking about myself, comes from the training and sort of the arena of theater training, and I say this recognizing that not every theater creator comes from the same training background, but I assume that many actors have come from some sort of repertory program or a post-secondary university education of some type. And I always found that though some of the early classes that I would take in terms of theater training always emphasized pulling you out, the necessity of pulling you out of your shell, right? Like you can't be inward facing. You have to be out. You have to be open. You have to be vulnerable. And obviously, there's merit to that, obviously, if you're going to be a performer. But I always found too that as a student, if you were a student in that situation, you were always, at least for my purposes and many of my classmates, there was always this perception of, we have to, impress our professor if we're going to advance forward, right? Or because there's always a sort of a sense of a competition, right? In order to get into the next class or the next year, at least I know it was in my studies at York. There was never, I never really sensed that, whoever you were, whatever your genuine sense of your personality was acceptable with regards to being an actor. I always sensed that you were always fighting against. I always felt that I was fighting against my own nature, which is really actually why I auditioned to get into at York. It was a 4-year program, and after first year, you kind of audition to get into the actor's specialty program, and everyone wanted to go in there except if you were in production. And I auditioned to get into the acting program, and I got in, and I was there for like one sort of week of classes, and kind of got the lay of the land and realized I don't want to do this. Like I do not want to be here. I do not want to be doing these exercises, these miming things, these mask things, these like the physicality type stuff, the warm up stuff, which I just bristle against because it was all out, it was all open, it was all big, blah. That was ironically enough when I said I'm just going to move to directing, and then I realized after that when I wanted to go into directing, what I was really interested in was playwriting. Like I was just really interested in the guts of scene work, and even writing my own scenes, but I wasn't really interested in being performative in any way. And I guess I kind of found, I wonder how much of that is the training ethic that goes into training theater people, specifically acting.
There is so much to unpack there, because I remember starting theater school and everybody was so big and out there, and it was the same thing in when I was in doing a community or amateur theater in high school and things like that. It was always so big, and I think that's one of the reasons why I got the idea that that's what you needed to be. And I think for a little bit I was able to maintain that, but man, it's just exhausting. And I think some of that has to do with why so many actors deal with a social situation, whether it's a networking event or something else, by requiring a little liquid courage, as Genevieve was saying. And I think you've got something to add.
Yeah, I don't advocate that, by the way, kids. Don't
It's actually not recommended. No.
No, that is not endorsed by this podcast or by myself. I think Stephen's point about competition is interesting. I think that almost like kind of one-upmanship also just comes from the ridiculous scarcity mentality we have in this country, especially about theater. Like, there's no jobs. There's no jobs in film. There's no jobs anywhere. So when you get on that set, you better steal that other person's awesome move they just did. You better take that line out of their mouths. And I've had these things happen to me on set where someone who was more vocal, that person who comes in and is immediately buddy with all the crew and just like, networking, you'll do a take, and she literally took a line out of my mouth, and then we moved on. And I was like, what just happened there? Like, is no one? And I worked in the UK for many years. And I mean, Lord knows what it's like there now, Brexit and stuff. But there was government funding for theater. The film industry was set up in a different way. And not that you're not going to meet jerk faces who want to climb on your back to look funny, like Michael's example, which is horrible, Michael. And I'm really sorry that happened to you. That's just bad. Not to say that won't happen, but it just felt like there was a little bit more pie to go around so people could be a little bit more collaborative. It didn't have to be so cutthroat, like me, I'm the funniest, look at me, and I'll shove you down to get there. And I mean, that's my individual experience. I'm sure everybody's had different ones, but I just wonder if we could be more generous to our artists in this country, if then the artists could be more generous to each other.
I mean, just to jump on that, I've been thinking about this a lot just in terms of other things, is the fact that, if we look at the Toronto ecosystem, you look at Hamilton and some of the surrounding areas, there's a very limited number of theaters. For example, if we just look at the theater world specifically, because this is a theater podcast, and there's really very few producing theaters as things go. And so there's very few jobs because they also tend to do smaller casts. And that's just, unfortunately, the nature of this system that we have that is entirely funded, for the most part, by grants and things like that, so that we're kind of in this situation where it's a very small pie with very large pieces of that pie. And there's not a lot to go around. Carolyn, I saw your hand up first.
Yes. Jumping off of Genevieve's comment about the competition, and Phil, your comment about Toronto having such a small theater world. I come from an even smaller theater world, Montreal, where you can count on both hands how many theater companies are out there. But for me right now, it's huge, Toronto. Huge. You have the established companies, you have the commercial companies, you have the indie companies, and then you have the startup companies who are also doing things that are interesting. So for me, my point of view is, oh my God, there's just way too many. I think I'll just stay home. And then, going, I'm glad we rarely, or pandemic talk, we don't go into physical auditions anymore. I am very, very happy with self-tapes, whether it be for theater or film or TV. I am so happy with self-tapes, because going into a lobby when you see 50 of the same genre of you sitting there vying for the same role, fudge. That's competition right there. And then I hear these people, these other actors say that, oh, I'm never in competition. Well, honey, there's only one role, and of the 50, they're going to choose one. So you're going to steal my line, like riffing off of Genevieve. You're going to steal my line. Lobbies. Thank you, pandemic.
No, it's actually, I mean, that because the in-person audition is still a social situation where you are still on. You're essentially performing from the time you walk into the building where the audition is taking place, and you're trying to be outgoing and friendly for everybody who's there. It's so difficult to do. Jess, I saw your hand up first.
I wanted to make a comment that was, it's funny, Carolyn. I come from even smaller than Montreal. I come from Niagara. We've got like maybe 2 or 3 professional companies. So the opportunity is so scarce that I think I'm at this point where I am searching incredibly hard to find opportunities to build myself up professionally. And thankfully I've found a writer's unit to get myself out there. But as an introvert, it's such a strange place to say, I need more. I need to be out there more. I need to push myself. I need to get out. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And, being in Niagara, it's, Toronto's a little bit of a journey. We don't, driving was really my only mode of transportation that I have. And then you've got Hamilton. But I found myself in this wonderful challenge though, because before the pandemic, it felt like there were so many opportunities. Where did they all go? And, it's great that things are videotaped, but at the same time, videotape. Wow. I've showed my age there, but, it's great that these things are digital, but at the same time though, I feel so far away from it all because I can't see anybody. I can't meet anyone.
Yeah. Yeah. Kristen, I saw you next.
Yeah. Thinking about, I heard the word jealousy and the word competition coming up, and that's sort of what I was, I guess, trying to touch on earlier when I was thinking about, why I found the whole thing kind of unhealthy for me and my personality type. And something that really set me off was the amount of times I would do a show, like, the rare time I would do a show that a lot of people saw, or, do an audition that people responded well to, or whatever, perform something that people enjoyed. This recurring thing would happen to me where someone would come up to me after, or, online, maybe say something about this, or like I'd say, Kristen Zaza is really great. It's a shame we don't see her so much on stage, or, why don't people, or why don't you do this more often? I would get a lot, and it drove me crazy because, first of all, it's like, obviously if I would, I could, the problem is it's not. I would ask the same question to the people I'm auditioning for or whatever. And we're in a city where, there's competition to do the, I don't want to put down any companies, but, or anything like that, but like where non-paying, non-union work is hard. Like you have to fight tooth and nail to get into, let alone a professional company or a general to get noticed at a general audition for a big company or something like that, and it would really, it was pretty heartbreaking and defeating after a while to hear like, wow, you're so great. Why don't we see you around? It's an excellent question, and one that really got under my skin in the worst ways. And a lot of times these would be the same people who, when I would be in the room with them or something, were the same ones not giving me opportunities in even the the simplest level of things. It's the competition, I think. I don't have a knack for it, and I don't enjoy it, and I don't like what it brings out in me. And I think that gets equated with a lack of ambition. And that's simply not true. I think probably everybody in this room, if we're this virtual room, if we're associating ourselves as introverts, can appreciate that, especially because I think we are the first ones to start creating opportunities for ourselves, because I think we see we A, feel the need, and perhaps B, feel a bit more comfortable doing that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because, as I look down the list here of everybody who's in this room, I know for a fact that everybody in this room makes their own work in some way, whether they playwright, whether they collective create, or where they perform and write, and all of these sorts of things. Everybody in this room is in that position of doing that. And I don't think that's an accident for for the introvert creative urge. Michael, I saw your hand first. You might be muted, Michael.
My apologies. Yes, first of all, I would just like to second that self-tapes are amazing and the best thing to ever happen to my career. Auditions were a nightmare. Not only are they obviously hard because there's so much competition, but living out in Durham, it's like an hour there and back through the traffic, and then I've got to shake that off, and I'm confronted with a room full of people that I'm very familiar with, who all are essentially me, and I have this crippling feeling of not belonging, of I don't know, sort of a dysmorphia almost. The more I think about being there, the more I feel like I don't belong there. So yes, self-tapes, great. I don't know what I'm going to do when we have to go back to in person. But contradictorily, in contradiction to that, I also yearn for connection, and I really enjoy rehearsal, and I really enjoy collaboration with collaborative people. So it's this, I think, going back to what you said, Phil, that you work well in smaller groups, not so well in larger groups. I would like to say I'm similar to you in that way, but I need to sort of cultivate the group in order for me to feel comfortable enough to allow my extroverted side out. But beyond that, how do we deal with all of this? Like, are there tools that that maybe you guys could give me? What are the tools that people use to navigate the barriers that we place and are placed in front of us in these situations?
I mean, that is that's a great question. And I will first off admit, and Jess and I have talked about this pretty recently on our podcast, The Introvert's Guide to, about one of my issues when I'm going into some kind of social situation, whether it's a party, a networking event, or any other kind of thing, there's this sense of, I think what you were expressing, Michael, about a lack of confidence, and in fact, there's a lot of negative self-talk that happens in my head as I'm going or getting ready to go to something like that. And that's one of the things that I've learned to combat with the question as I'm thinking, the most common one, Phil, no one likes you. Why would you bother going? Is examining that and thinking, look, wait, is that true? I know that there are people who like me, and I know that some of them are going to be there. And again, that promise for only getting in the door for 15 minutes. Those are definite things that I do. I think solutions and tips and tricks we can start to work towards. But I know that Stephen and Genevieve have had something. Stephen, why don't you go first?
Yeah, so I think for introverts, the adage "there's strength in numbers" is not true for us. But what I would say is there really is confidence in collaboration, right? And I think that's what I'm hearing from a lot of people. I mean, my sort of sense of finding my own voice as an artist, I think, really only came about when I was able to find sort of consistent partners who wanted to collaborate with me on creating new work, right? Like I was never one of these people that I think I thought that, I was going to be this person, this artist who was going to create stuff on my own, right? And when the media covers artists, right? Like when Now Magazine puts someone on the cover of Now Magazine, it's very common that it's a specific artist that people are looking at, and I think that was an image in my head that I had to conform against. But really, I only came into my voice, I think, when I started working with directors, specifically in my case, that, that I could work with one-on-one. And then, the two of us could be a collaborative team. And then, through that, I was able to work with actors and set designers and stuff like that, and what have you, to bring pieces to life and to feel comfortable with myself, and to kind of come out of my shell. So I really thought that the creation of work in collaboration with someone was always, for me, that was a really big step forward. In terms of sort of other strategies, though, I think there's also, once I was able to, and this kind of goes back to what you were saying, Phil. I think once I was kind of able to get away from judging myself, and just frankly being more comfortable with being an introvert in sort of a crowded party space, like not forcing myself to be performative and go up to someone and make conversation for the sake of making conversation, but like going to a party and hanging around the snack table and putting food on the plate and sitting down and just being comfortable with that. And whoever comes up and talks to me will talk to me, and if not, whatever. That's not always worked, but it's worked a whole heck of a lot better than forcing myself to go up to someone that I didn't know, that I thought I should have a conversation with, and then walking away from that conversation feeling even worse than I did beforehand.
Yeah, absolutely. There's one of the things about those networking events is, and parties and things like that, all these things that we quote unquote should do, is there is a tendency in the industry, unless it's like a reception after an opening, for example, to show up to those things a little later, which always means that everybody is a couple of drinks in, and you might not be, because you're just arriving.
Mm-hmm.
I always find, or I think that it's better to show up early, but then that's me. I'm one of those annoying people who shows up to things early. And what that allows you to do is to sort of like get the lay of the room and find your spot, and just sort of like figure, like, you can see who's coming in, but not. It's a little less tense and a little less intimidating than if you walk into the room that's already full. Genevieve.
Yeah. Maybe people can take courage from this. I recently sort of discovered that you can email a lot of people during the pandemic, and they will talk to you happily when maybe they wouldn't have beforehand. Especially if you're just radically open and honest, and you're like, hey, I really love your work, or hey, I've sent you a couple of things and you've never seen me. Can we like have a little chat about that? And I feel much better pitching by email. I feel like there's no stakes if they never get back to me, and they have actually because of the pandemic. But the second thing, which can maybe help, or I don't know, maybe it's terrible, is when I did speak to some of those people I emailed, and I was like, hey, so, why hasn't it ever happened for us, basically? And they were like, oh, we just thought you were really self-contained and arrogant and didn't need us. And I was like, oh no, I was scared. I was not confident and aloof and knew what I was doing. I was just terrified of approaching you. So I think obviously that's not awesome either, but I gained a bit of confidence that I was like, okay, nobody knows what you feel. Nobody knows if you feel a little intimidated. They might be intimidated by you. And that kind of released me from having to be cool, and I can find a way forward that's not so scary through kind of goofy honesty with people. That one's easy for me. It's accessible. So once we can get there, then we can build a real relationship, right? But it was just a funny moment for me. I'm like, here I am thinking that they don't want to talk to me, and I suck, and I'm an imposter. And meanwhile, they're just like, well, she just doesn't need us. She thinks she's awesome with her, So it's just it was a humbling reminder that nobody knows anything about anybody.
I want to jump into Stephen as in the chat has put introversion mistaken for arrogance, and I want to point out that that's it. Sometimes it's not arrogance, sometimes it's mystery, but sometimes it's arrogance, right? There's like this thing that happens with the introvert that keeps to themselves. In some ways, there are people who are like, now what are they actually thinking? What's going on over there? But in some ways, we can be intimidating in that way. Now, think about that and how much anxiety we often have in those situations, that in some ways, the people that we are intimidated by us. The other thing I would say is I was talking with Jackie Maxwell years ago, and she said, here's the secret. And she said, I tell everyone the secret, and I'm telling you the secret. It's important to know. The secret is that people want to help you. All you have to do is ask. And whether it is, could I buy you a coffee and we can sit down and chat? Whether it's, I just, I had some questions. People will almost always say yes. I have, in the course of 6 years of doing this podcast, never had anybody say no to coming on the podcast. People are genuinely interested in doing things and helping out. And so just even shooting an email that says, hey, I've seen you in this, I have some questions, could we sit down? They will almost always say yes. And that's a fascinating thing. Carolyn.
That Judeo-Christian saying, ask and ye shall receive. It is so true. But to even get there, to even say, okay, I need help on this. I see the person that has the skill or whatever to help me. And that person may be, in my mind, up high on some pedestal. I am not worthy. That's what where my brain goes. I am not worthy. I am not worthy. So what happens? Like Genevieve says, I have this resting face that looks like I'm arrogant. For those who don't know me, I am Asian, so my features might look a bit harsh when I'm not smiling. And then all these people think, oh, that's Carolyn. That's Carolyn. She's good on her own. She doesn't need help. Well, I do need help. I'm dying inside. But it's always that, how do I break through to ask that person for help? Please, somebody in this roundtable, please tell me.
Here's what I will jump in and I will say is it's important to remember, because what Jackie Maxwell was saying is true. People want to help you. Keep that in mind. That, you could say, listen, I've been around for a while. I have questions. Can you help? Email is certainly like, don't pick up the phone. And as I'm speaking to a room full of introverts, nobody's picking up the phone. But it's the idea of sending that email can also be intimidating. But just remember, people want to help. And so you can ask that question. And if you write it out a couple of times, send it to a friend and say, if I send this to so-and-so, what do you think? And if you can, send it to another introvert, because if you have an extroverted friend, they might tell you to say something else. But like, just send the email. I know whenever I send one of those emails, I'm always stressed before I do it, but I've never been disappointed by the outcome. Stephen.
Yeah, I would just second that. I was, and I think I wish I had had the courage and had known, basically had heard that piece of advice you just told me, a lot earlier in my career, because, I always think, it's going to be so much harder than it actually will be. But the times that I've sent an email to an artistic director or a literary manager at a company, or even artists whose work I've admired, have all responded, "Oh yeah, sure. Why don't we get together here and here?" And I mean, I recall one time I sent a script to the artistic director of a theater. It didn't go anywhere, but it did open up a dialogue, and I was always really surprised by that, by how not easy it was, but how less painful it was, like the anxiety before, mounting up to that, the actual action was far more than the actual act itself. And so I would echo your suggestion. I mean, it just sending an email and just reaching out is a good thing, because it makes me wonder, well, how many of us in the community really are introverts, but are just being performative as extroverts, right? Because we're in the theater and we have to be performative in some way, shape, or form. We have to put on a show. Because weirdly enough, a lot of people that I meet in this industry, when I meet with them face to face, either tell me, "Oh, I'm a very private person," or I don't really like industry parties or what have you, or very obviously are my type of people. So it's
It is a fascinating thing to think about. And I could tell you that, in 6 years of doing this show, I've spoken probably to more introverts than extroverts. But I think there are some people who mask it better. Some people mask it by throwing, again, the little Dutch courage, which again, we don't endorse or recommend. But there's a little bit of the idea of if I'm at a fringe festival, if I'm looking around, there are people who do it so well, like the flyering lines and all that sort of thing. I think to myself, they absolutely must be extroverts. They must be. And for the most part, they are. Otherwise, I've seen them with their head between their knees, hyperventilating, psyching themselves up to hit the line. There's the two kinds, and you can almost spot them doing it. But some people are just, there's also the ambivert, which is another thing entirely. Carolyn, it's an excellent question. What is a flyering line? When people are at the Fringe Festival and they line up outside the venue, something that happens in a lot of Fringe festivals, but not all. Montreal does not line up, for example. At least when I was there were no lines. People just sort of showed up when the show was about to start. But we go to the line as performers and presenters and go through the line, handing out flyers to try to get people to come to our show. So we go to another show's line and try to get them to come to the show. Genevieve, I know you had some thoughts.
Oh, just more on how to motivate yourself to send that email. This works for me, and it speaks to what a bad person I am. But if ever I get really jealous of a peer, like, I see something on Facebook, or I hear that so-and-so's show has just been made on CBC, and I feel really bad about myself and start going, well, wow, you don't have a book published like they do. You're the same age and you're not at Stratford. That's when I schedule an email to someone, because I'm like, I have that energy, and it's negative energy, and it spurs me, and I'm like, okay, let's do something positive rather than sitting here and spiraling. And that works really well, because I'm a mean, jealous person.
I mean, one of the things that I have, I mean, the whole idea of networking, parties, that sort of thing. I'm pretty good at sending emails now, although I will admit, every time I am about to send one of those emails, I'm still stressed out. So that's just a fact of doing it. And I have some anxiety.
Always.
But I definitely I've learned how to do it, and I know that it's usually going to turn out fine. With those parties and networking things, like Jess and I have said so often on the Introvert's Guide too, the the promise, even if you have trouble getting there, the promise of that you only have to stay for 15 minutes is such a good way to get yourself in the door. And then once you're there, chances are you will either find somebody that you know, a nice extrovert to adopt you and take and sort of like be your shield in the room, or if you look around the edge of the room, you'll find the other introverts that you can, then those are your people and you can go talk to them. And you may actually be surprised about who the introverts in that room are. Like they might be people that you thought were extroverts, and there they are. And now you have something in common with them, something you can discuss. And chances are you're going to have some better conversations with the introverts than you would the extroverts anyway.
I've said it once and I'll say it again, Phil. I still think you need a smoke bomb to leave a party.
Oh, come on.
You absolutely do.
Listen, and what Jess is referring to is I'm a big believer in what's known as in some circles the Irish goodbye, and that is I come in, I make sure say hello to whoever the host is, and I go. And if the 15 minutes are up and I've decided that I need to go, I'm gone. I don't say goodbye. They saw me come in. Later on, they might be like, "When did Phil leave?" But I don't worry about that. I just get out because I'm done. Anybody else have other tips?
I feel like so many wonderful points were said. I'm trying to think of something.
Michael.
So this is a bit performative, but I found when my shyness is getting a bit too much, when I'm feeling particularly introverted and I'm going into an audition, that I have a conversation with myself in the car or outside of the room before I've started to interact with any of the other people I'm auditioning with. And it's a bit of a mind trick, but I convince myself that I don't really want this job. And I make a list in my head of the reasons why this job isn't right for me, how it's a big waste of my time, and it's a mind trip. Like it's a bit of a trick of the mind. But when I get into the room, I often find, and it has been successful for me on a few occasions, that I enter with a quality that draws people in that I wouldn't normally have, and that I don't know. There's that human. I think this is naturally human reaction that people have, in the way that the heart sometimes wants the thing it cannot have. Coming in with this idea that I have better things to do. Let's get this over with. Has given me a confidence, which has actually helped me book a few gigs over the years.
Jess.
I think something that helps me, and especially in this, when speaking about the jealousy, in specifically with the jealousy. Sorry, I tripped over my words there. There is room for everybody in this field. As much as the jobs are scarce and it can be competitive, like Phil said, a lot of us are creators. We do create our own work and we collaborate. And when I see others achieving something that I wanted, or they went out and got it before I could even think of doing something that incredible, I just remember that there is room for me too. Although I move at a different pace, although my needs are going to be different, I know that I am valid as an artist. Even when I am not creating, I am still an artist and I still have that capability within myself. So I think just finding ways to have that little tool belt of self-reassurance and good affirmations as an artist is really a good form of self-care as well. Because I think introverted artists definitely need that little self-pat on the back that we're doing better than we think.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the reasons why I wanted to have this conversation is there is that perception that actors are extroverts. And sometimes as introverts, we sometimes think we're the only ones out there, that there are so few of us. And it's so not true. As we could see, there are so many people that I couldn't fit into this conversation who reached out and said that they are introverts and they'd love to have the conversation. And it's just a fact that there's probably more of us than we think. So, if there's 7 people as a part of this conversation who you as a listener now know are introverts, and so now you know that you're not alone as an introvert, and that's something to know. And also, like, now, watch the corners of the room, watch the edges of the room. That's where your people are. And that's such an important thing. If you ever see me at an event, first off, if you see me at some kind of social event, understand that I might be near the end of my 15 minutes that I promised myself, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't come over. And you can use the secret word, the secret passphrase, which is, I hate these things, don't you? And I 100% will I'll welcome you into whatever is happening because I understand you're my people. There's an interesting thing about the things that we interpret our introversion as, because sometimes, as Jess and I have discussed on our podcast, is about sometimes anxiety goes along with the introversion, and we can think of our introversion as a deficit, as some kind of a bad thing, and often we can give it an unhealthy name such as cowardice, which it absolutely is not. Remember that this is just a way of how you interact with the world. You get your energy from a different place than extroverts do. You communicate in a slightly different way. And sometimes it just takes a little more to get you in the room, but that is 100% not cowardice. It's listening. Remember, listening is our superpower as introverts. So it puts us into, whenever we walk into a space, we're more aware of what's going on, and we're more aware of the things that are happening around us, and we're listening better. Just to throw that out there. As we draw to a close, does anybody have any final thoughts before we end tonight? Carolyn.
I think you nailed it on the head when you said listening. We are sponges. We get the vibe of the room. We get the feel of the room through whatever insecurities we have. We are that much more open. And again, referring back to these Judeo-Christian sayings, which I am not I don't practice. It's, the meek shall inherit the earth. I think, listening and then inheriting whatever is surrounding us.
Yeah, it's interesting because you talk about the listening and all of that sort of stuff. The sensitivity is another way of putting it. In Susan Cain's book Quiet, she describes the introverted child as a highly sensitive child, or that introverts are highly sensitive. And so that is the thing. When we walk into a room full of people, in some ways we are overwhelmed by all of the things that's going on. It's an excellent book, and I do recommend it. Quiet by Susan Cain. It's such a great book for any introvert to read. Genevieve, I think you have some thoughts too.
I was just going to say, I think we should get t-shirts made for the introverts, and we can all just, you could sell them, Phil, and you'll just slap one on at a networking event, and then you'll just look for people wearing or give each other like a secret handshake or something.
Just a t-shirt that says introvert, or a button. You could just like have this nice little subtle button that just says introvert.
It would have to be subtle, right? Because the introvert would never put the t-shirt on in the first place.
That's right. But if you get like a button that's like an introvert symbol, or it says introvert on it, because we're looking for that sort of thing, you'll see it. You'll be like, I need to talk to that person. person, right?
I love it.
I would probably wear the introvert T-shirt just to be that kind of annoying person. But it's probably a good idea. We're about to wrap up. So if anybody has anything else that they want to say, now is your time.
Just thank you, Phil. This has been wonderful. Quite cathartic. Thank you.
Thank you, all of you. And I would say to anybody who's listening, take note of the people who are participating in this. Know that they are your people. Know that I'm your people. If you're an introvert, if you have questions about being an introvert in the industry, reach out. If you're writing a letter and you write an email to somebody and you're like, I need a pair of introverted eyes to look over this message, I'm happy to look it over. I'll take a look. Just don't inundate me too much. But I'm happy to look those over for you, so you could send those off. Jess.
So unrelated, but just as a little thing here, an introverted roundtable, and yet this has been so organized, well articulated comments. Everyone's just been so lovely.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for having this conversation. It's been wonderful. And I look forward to when we can see each other at a distance sometime in the future.